Steve, we just had the Secretary of State from Arizona confirm their official results in Arizona. They are expecting to 10 to 13 days. They say with larger margins, maybe the media companies will be able to project things earlier than that. That's not their concern. Does that jibe with the way that you are thinking about Arizona? And indeed, how should we set our expectations in terms of what we're going to know on election night?
Yeah, I think Arizona is the state, if it's suspenseful and if the Electoral College math is depending on Arizona and add to that Nevada, one of those two states, it's going to be a while. If it's close in those states and the electoral math depends on it, for the reasons you just heard in that interview, and it's fairly similar in Nevada, too, just in terms of it's a ton of mail-in ballots that they do not all get counted on election night or the day after, and it becomes a days-long process. So if the count is very close, if there's a possibility of the result changing as those days of subsequent mail-in voting counting take place, those states won't be called. If they're crucial to the math, we'll be waiting on them like last time around. That's the long game scenario, I think. But in the other battleground states, the 5 eastern battleground states, a bit of a different story potentially from 2020. Let's take you through Tuesday night, 7 o'clock Eastern time. The polls are going to close in Georgia. This will be the first battleground state where we start getting results, and we expect we will get a lot of results. In Georgia, they can pre-process the mail ballots, the absentee ballots. Those can be pre-processed. So they don't, some states they have to wait till the polls close. It's a cumbersome process of verifying signatures. That can all be done ahead of time in Georgia. And there's a ton of early in-person voting, which is relatively easy to tabulate, too. There's also going to be folks who wait till Election Day to vote. Expect that to come in throughout the night, too. But the bottom line is you should have the vast majority of the vote counted in Georgia sometime late that night into the very, very early hours of Wednesday morning. Remember, Georgia's one of those states in 2020 it took so long because they had a flood of mail-in ballots. Mail-in voting is down 75% in Georgia, just mechanically going to be much easier, probably, to tabulate those results in North Carolina, in Georgia. To go to North Carolina, that's our second battleground poll closing, 7:30 Eastern. Very similar here. Expect of the mail voting that takes place, and again, that's down to the mail-in voting and the absentee to come fast and furious not long after those polls close at 7:30. The same-day vote will then follow that. And you expect, as we showed you earlier if you were watching, we expect the same-day vote in North Carolina and a lot of other places to favor Trump, to favor the Republicans. So put that on your radar right now. In North Carolina, likely what we expect is the Democrats will get their best numbers with the big early returns. And then the question becomes, can Trump erase that if the Democrats are ahead with the same-day voting? So again, 7 o'clock hour, you're getting those two. I'll skip Pennsylvania for 1 second and just quickly take you through the other two Midwest states. Michigan is the state that's had massive changes to its procedures, a total overhaul. This is a state that took a long time because of the clog of mail-in voting in 2020. Well, now they can, this is brand new for Michigan, this idea of pre-processing mail-in votes. Again, all that administrative work to get the ballot ready to be counted, they're already doing that in most places in Michigan. That's a big change from 2020. So is the fact that Michigan now, unlike 2020, they have early in-person voting, and tons of people there, we're seeing from the stats, are taking advantage of it. So that combination of pre-processing, of reduced mail-in voting, and of that rise of early in-person voting, we could have, again, a much clearer picture of Michigan on election night than we've had before. Again, most of Michigan's going to close at 8 p.m. There's 4 counties on the fringes of the UP that stay open till 9 Eastern, but we will have results, no call, but we will have results in that 8 o'clock hour, a lot of them. Wisconsin, this could be very dramatic in the early hours of Wednesday, the wee hours of Wednesday. This is how it's played out a couple elections now recently. Just to explain it again, in Wisconsin, they've got something that resembles early in-person voting, but it's not technically called that. We don't have to get into that. But basically, folks who are voting early in person or who are voting absentee, there are some cities in Wisconsin where they take those votes and they count them at the end of the night in one location, and then all of those votes get released. And where that happens most dramatically, we will be talking about this as these results come in Tuesday, is the city of Milwaukee. All of the votes cast before Election Day are counted after everything else is counted. This usually happens like 2, 3 in the morning, maybe a little earlier if they're quicker, and then it all gets reported out. Huge Democratic city, biggest city in Wisconsin. Wisconsin, we have seen in recent elections Republicans leading late and having that absentee early vote release from Milwaukee, putting the Democrats ahead. That happened with Joe Biden. It was the moment in 2020 when I realized Biden had shifted to the advantageous position over Trump. It was when Trump had about a 20,000 vote lead in Wisconsin, about 4 in the morning. That Milwaukee batch came in. Biden went ahead, realized then Biden was probably going to win Milwaukee. Pay attention for that. If it's close everywhere else in Wisconsin, we are going to be waiting on that, and that's going to be a very significant moment in this election. And I'll just land here. I left Pennsylvania because Pennsylvania is the biggest wild card when it comes to the timing of this. Remember, in 2020, it was Pennsylvania that ultimately resulted in the election being called about 11:30 in the morning Saturday. What was that because of? Pennsylvania, for the first time, COVID emergency 2020, did vote by mail, and they were flooded with vote by mail, in part because Pennsylvania does not have that early in-person voting. So you're either voting by mail or you're voting on election day. There's a little bit of a shift in that this year, but again, that's the broad contour of it. The key, though, again, Pennsylvania did not change its laws. Part of the problem in 2020, all those mail-in votes, they had to wait till the election day to start going through them administratively. It just took forever. Didn't change the law, but again, with mail-in voting coming way down this year, that's just going to be a lot less to process for these counties. They've got more experience. They've had a few elections since 2020 doing it. And also there are procedures in place in some of these big counties now to continue counting round the clock, not close down shop for the night. We saw that happen a bit in 2022. So the potential exists in Pennsylvania to be significantly faster than 2020. But as I say, it's a huge wild card because, again, with no changes in these laws, actually, you're just kind of depending on the mechanics being smoother and maybe the folks running these to have a little bit more experience, a little bit know-how. So we will see on Pennsylvania. Obviously, if we're waiting on that, that is going to be a huge piece of the electoral puzzle.
One slightly impolitic follow-up for you on this, Steve. When you talk about the mechanics and the different procedures that have been put in place, particularly ones that have changed since 2020, are there any of these real crucial jurisdictions that have really important races that we're going to be watching really carefully where you feel like they made some real inexplicable decisions in terms of new procedures or ways they're going to handle the vote that you're just watching for as a potential bottleneck? Are there places where the technocratic way they're approaching the count is something that's keeping you up at night?
Yeah, there's a couple things that were giving some concern to some election officials that are being held up by courts right now that I think could have been wild cards in this. There's a procedure in North Carolina, basically, about the early in-person voting that might have that delay. I mean, I'm talking like 15, 30 minutes there. I should say there is a change that I think is good in Pennsylvania. I say there are no big changes, but there's one in terms of just public knowing what's going on in Pennsylvania at midnight. On election night, even if there's all these uncounted mail-in votes, they have to now tell you, these counties do, how many total mail-in votes they have. So we will know at midnight, if this is all goes to plan, we will know what the universe is beyond that of mail-in votes to be counted. That was a bit of a mystery as that whole process played out in 2020. So from a transparency standpoint, if that is what we end up seeing, we'll have a little bit of clarity even if we don't have the votes in Pennsylvania.
Fascinating. That's very helpful, Steve. Thank you very much.